Hey, everybody. It is Thursday, April 10th. I'm Moshe Winunu, and you're listening to the Mo News Podcast.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. I feel like yesterday very much reinforced to me the meme from 30 Rock, where Liz Lemon says to Jack Donaghy, "It's been a week." And he says, "It's Wednesday, Lemon."
That is certainly what it feels like this week, and actually a lot of weeks recently.
Well, we're going to go into just how remarkable these last 7 days were, given, as many of you might know by now, if you're following us on Instagram or following the headlines, that the tariffs are reversed or paused, kind of, and what that meant to the markets and what that meant to everything else. But it's been a roller coaster. We're on it, and we still got 2 days left in this week.
Okay, let's get to some headlines. A major about face. President Trump announces a 90-day tariff pause, and the market stages a furious rally. We break down the numbers. And is the market upheaval really behind us?
I'm going to say no.
President Trump versus the courts. Some new rulings in New York and Texas could curb deportations of Venezuelans to El Salvador. The Trump administration also taking aim at some new schools over anti-Semitism, freezing money for Cornell and Northwestern. Moshe, I don't think anybody likes a weak showerhead, especially more than President Trump does, and he is taking action.
Yeah, if you've seen his campaign rallies, he used to go on 10-minute spiels about shower pressure. Well, between all the tariff news yesterday, Jill, he also addressed that. We'll get into it.
What's new at the Los Angeles Olympics, some new sports, and some mixed gender team events. And Moshe's on this day in history.
You jump, I jump. Your clue today.
Okay, starting again with tariffs and the roller coaster for all of us. President Trump on Wednesday afternoon abruptly announced that he would pause the implementation of the reciprocal tariffs on 80 plus countries for the next 90 days. So those were the tariffs that went into effect yesterday at midnight of up to 50% on a number of U.S. trading partners. Still, 10% tariffs remain on most of the world during this 90-day pause. Again, this pause will last at least 90 days as individual countries negotiate with the Trump administration on their tariffs and trade policies. The only exception, China. The president announcing that he would raise tariffs on Chinese goods again. So now they're up to 125% after Beijing announced a new round of retaliation. Still, Wall Street liked the news. Stocks soared. The S&P 500 had its best day since 2008, rising 9.5%. The Dow finished nearly 8% higher. Moshe, quite the turnaround.
Jill, the numbers were remarkable. And if you look at the week-long chart, we put it up on Instagram, we're basically where we were at on Liberation Day, the day that Trump declared last Wednesday all these new tariffs. So we've been on this roller coaster, mainly down and then significantly up yesterday. For the S&P 500, it was the third biggest gain in post-World War II history. For the Dow, the biggest percentage change since March 2020 and one of its all-time highs. The NASDAQ, the tech-heavy NASDAQ, the largest one-day jump since 2001. Its second best day ever. 30 billion shares traded, the largest volume day in Wall Street history.
And it came just hours after the president said that he would never change his tariff policy. He told Americans to, quote, be cool. So what changed?
Yes, like Countess Luann. We made the Real Housewives reference on the Instagram feed.
Don't be all uncool.
Come on, guys, get it together. Though notably, Jill, we should mention, Trump tweeted or put on Truth Social, his social media page, be cool. And then also around 9:30 a.m., which he did say yesterday that he made the decision. He later told us in the afternoon, he made the call in the morning. He did say it's time to buy, which now will be my cue in the future to buy stocks when the president tweets that out.
But for real, what changed when it came to this policy? Here is a reporter asking President Trump about the about face.
There was a pause put in on the tariffs. Can you walk us through your thinking about why you decided to put a 90-day pause?
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, they were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
The president later said, you've got to have flexibility. The president also said that he watched an interview with Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, saying that the tariffs could cause a recession. The abrupt change in course also came amid a sell-off in U.S. bonds, which are generally a safer investment. And it also came after days of deep losses in financial markets around not only the United States, but around the globe. In announcing the pause, the White House repeatedly tried to suggest that this was the plan all along, Moshe. So this was all premeditated. Here is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent again saying this was Trump's strategy all along.
I think the willingness by more than 75 countries to come and negotiate, I think now the market understands that everything they saw last Wednesday was a ceiling, and now we have a 10% temporary floor. And I think the market, my 35 years in the market, I always wanted certainty, so I think we've got more certainty.
Moshe, that's something we talked about a lot. Markets like certainty, but there is still a lot of uncertainty here.
A lot of uncertainty. Remember, it's just a 90-day pause. So if you're a major corporation or a small business, if there's a chance that these tariffs all come back in 90 days, or some of them, you're going to be more reluctant to hire someone, to expand, to buy property, to buy more stock, a variety of things. So this general deal here and this tariff uncertainty could basically serve as a storm cloud over us for a while. And that's the big concern you hear from banking CEOs and others here. Jill, as for the whole idea this was a strategy all along, it depends on how one defines strategy. You know, we know from the Trump administration, going back to his first term, that he negotiates through a bit of uncertainty, that he likes uncertainty to strike deals. I mean, go back to the first term, and you can apply it to anything. Kim Jong-un. I mean, there was a point in the first term where we're like, oh my God, are we going to nuclear war with the North Koreans? And then months later, he's sitting down with Kim Jong-un and like they're having a summit. And he approaches foreign policy in that way. He approaches economics in that way. He approaches Capitol Hill in that way. And in this case, he approached the international financial system, the stock market, and global business in that way. And so part of his strategy is chaos and unpredictability. But as you mentioned, certainty, predictability is what Wall Street wants, is what business wants. If you're going to do short-term planning, medium-term planning, long-term planning. So it's been whiplash here. You mentioned the bond market. Trump actually mentioned yesterday that he was watching the bond market. And the thing about American bonds are you're making an investment in the American government. If any of you have ever bought a bond, you're basically loaning the government money to do what it wants. And then you're going to get paid back 3 months out, 5 years later, 10 years later, depending on what bond you buy. The amount, the principal that you paid in, plus a little interest. Now, what was happening to the bond market was it was becoming riskier at the same time stocks were down. Typically, there's a relationship there. When stocks are down, people go into bonds. They're a safer investment. You don't get the highs of the stock market, but you also get the lows of the stock market. But this was a unique situation these past 48 hours or so, where the bond market started to become uncertain. There were questions about the Japanese and the Chinese, which own a great deal of U.S. bonds. Are they going to be pulling out and not buying here? So it became riskier to invest in the U.S. government. And that is a, basically tentpole of the U.S. economy, of the global economy. And so that became a huge issue here. Bessent yesterday was asked about it and sort of dismissed it. Trump actually said yesterday afterwards, the bond market now is beautiful, as he said. So again, they claim this was the plan all along. Trump says somebody had to pull the trigger. This is just like I was telling folks, you just had to have the stomach for this. You had to roll. As you mentioned, the tweet from yesterday morning, be cool, everybody. But you know who wasn't cool? Like half the Republicans on Capitol Hill who were speaking publicly. And this was notable, Jill, the fact that Republicans for the first time in this term were publicly criticizing the White House, saying, I don't know about this plan. The president, better be sure about what he's doing here. I really think tariffs are a tax, to the point, as we've told you, that some Republicans on the Hill were trying to take tariff authority away from him. We're trying to assert Congress over him again. So clearly he was hearing things, seeing things behind the scenes here that led him to make this decision. It was a tumultuous week here. It's been a tumultuous month here. This 90-day pause, well, what's going to happen here? Again, uncertainty. The U.S. economy is consumer-driven. 70% of our economy is based on us spending money. Jill spending money. Me spending money. All of you spending money. That's the way things work here. Buying big things, buying homes, buying cars, buying small things. Well, after this, are people going to be going out to eat as much? Are people watching their bank accounts right now? given the uncertainty here, given that, again, at the end of 90 days, what's up? Now, we do know that based on what we're seeing here, that one of the questions Wall Street had, and we all had, was, are these tariffs negotiable? Well, clearly they are. So that's a positive sign that these tariffs are not just there forever, that he's willing to negotiate on here, that he's willing to be flexible. So the market's certainly taking some solace there. But ultimately, for the rest of us, how do you plan your year and what are you spending your money on is going to be one big question here. And we should mention, while the reciprocal tariffs are gone, 10% tariffs still a big deal.
It's quite literally paying 10% more for everything.
If everything is passed along, right? At least the importers have to. So then Costco and Amazon and any small shop that imports from abroad, your local wine shop that's bringing in wine from Europe, right? Like, are they going to pass along all 10% to you? They're going to pass. Certainly prices will go up here. This will have an inflationary effect. You have Republicans even saying this is a tax. This is a consumption tax. Basically, everything just went up from around the world 10%. And then the China thing, 125%. So they have an 84%, as of this recording, an 84% tariff on us. We have a 125% tariff on them. Absurd numbers, by the way. The question is, who's going to blink here? Who's going to concede? We know how things are going to go from Washington. Trump's going to declare victory here. The Chinese, we know based on their statements, they're going to declare victory here. And so how will they walk themselves off the ledge together? Who's going to make that first phone call? How is that going to work? Is going to be the big question here. And then there's the internal politics of all of this. Bessent has been the face of this in particular. He went out to the reporters yesterday to announce this. Who wasn't there? Peter Navarro. We mentioned the fight between him and Elon Musk. He crafted this policy. So will there be a fall guy, so to speak, for all of this? That's one of the big questions we have here, because they made a big bet here. The bet didn't quite work out. They claim it worked out, but certainly they probably could have done without the market fluctuations and the need to kind of pull back after, just a few days of business there. But ultimately, what's going to happen? Because one of the goals, I think, also was they were hoping the bond market the yield would drop. Basically, it would make it cheaper for the government to borrow money, and they would save hundreds of billions of dollars. And that plan didn't work out, or one of the effects they were hoping for didn't work out here. So just a lot of questions, a little bit of breathing room, but I wouldn't be surprised, Jill, we were mentioning before the podcast, if after the market rallied to the insane levels yesterday, the market drops a little bit today as they deal with the reality of a 10% across the board tariff for here on out for a while until negotiations happen with these 70 or so countries, and this 125% China tariff.
Already feeling the impact of the tariffs, or at least bracing for the impact of the tariffs with China, Bloomberg is reporting that Amazon has canceled orders for multiple products made in China and other Asian countries. The orders for beach chairs, scooters, air conditioners, and other merchandise from multiple Amazon vendors were halted after the president's April 2nd announcement that he planned to put those tariffs in place. The timing of the cancellations, which had no warning, led the vendors to suspect that it was a response to the tariffs, Amazon not commenting.
One vendor who talked to Bloomberg here said that they got a note from Amazon saying they were canceling the order, saying it was placed in error here. That vendor, by the way, $500,000 wholesale order was nixed. The chairs had been manufactured, so they're on the hook here. Again, the absurdity of 125% tariffs right now. Right now, the White House believes it's going to hurt China more than it hurts us, but there's no shortage of companies that either get their parts from China, make their products in China, and so they're dealing with all of this. Amazon often imports items in bulk to reduce costs, and so they're canceling those orders. That puts the tariff pressure back on the individual vendors here. And so when you actually go to Amazon.com, the percentage of products that Amazon buys directly from vendors accounts for about 40% of the products on the website. The rest are independent merchants. But it does speak to the larger negative picture here for companies. There's a lot of statements coming out here. You mentioned the Jamie Dimon comments from, JP Morgan, largest bank in the world. His concern that defaults are going to rise, that recession is basically going to happen here. You got Delta, you got Walmart, and other CEOs warning of pessimism here that is going to bring down demand. But Delta and travel companies thought this would be a huge year for travel. And so with uncertainty, with the prospect of a recession, with the market fluctuations, are people willing to spend the money they were going to? And so it makes it really hard also as these businesses predict how to expand, what merchandise to buy, etc. how to estimate the American consumer who already going into the past couple of weeks was already starting to feel a little shaky. We've been talking about some of the consumer surveys from January and February already on this podcast.
Time for the speed read from the New York Times. 2 federal judges issued separate orders on Wednesday, placing some roadblocks in the Trump administration's continuing efforts to use a powerful wartime statute to deport Venezuelan migrants accused of being gang members to El Salvador. The 2 rulings, one in New York and one in Texas, were in direct response to a Supreme Court decision handed down Monday that overturned a similar order issued last month by a federal judge in Washington. They suggest that even though President Trump declared victory when the justices weighed in on the matter, the battle over using the wartime law called the Alien Enemies Act to deport migrants is certain to continue.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, the Supreme Court effectively allowing the administration to still use the Alien Enemies Act because they didn't actually rule on the act itself. This is the law from 1798 that allows the government to deport people who are seen as part of a invasion or war. This would be the first time it's being invoked in a non-war time. But for the Trump administration, this is war. They see Tren de Aragua and these other gangs from South America and Central America as effectively terror groups engaged in warfare here. And so ultimately they believe, the White House has believed, that this 1798 law allows them to deport these individuals without seeing a judge. Now, what the Supreme Court ruled this week was, we're actually not going to deal with the law right now. That's not this specific case. This was a case related to 5 individuals who didn't want to be deported under the law. And so they found that the individuals actually have to go back and file it in federal court in Texas because they filed it in D.C. They said, this is not your jurisdiction. And then separately, they did find, and this is something the ACLU and the opponents of the White House were stressing, that the law, they believe, still requires notice and due process. That what the Trump administration had been interpreting here, they could just pick someone up off the street, put them on a plane to El Salvador, no judge, no notice. The Supreme Court said, no. There's got to be notice here. There's got to be due process. Nonetheless, you do have the lower court saying, okay, thanks, Supreme Court, hand it back to us. And they're dealing with it. And so they're saying, again, they don't believe that they can use this for deportation. So this now gets into the larger question of the law itself, as opposed to the practical matter the Supreme Court dealt with. And so you had a judge in Manhattan issue a decision. You had a judge in Texas, down in Bronzeville, issue a decision that basically prevents the Trump administration from using the Alien Enemies Act to remove any Venezuelan they accuse of being a gang member, at least for the near term. So there's a lot of hearings. There's a lot of courts adjudicating this. As for the 200 or so who are already deported down there to El Salvador, so far the court hasn't addressed that either. So that's a separate case that we'll be following as well. And by the way, we're also following that other immigration case, the case of that Maryland man, that Maryland migrant who was deported down there. And that's going through the system itself as well.
From the Washington Post, the Trump administration has frozen more than $1 billion in funding for Cornell and $790 million for Northwestern amid civil rights investigations into both schools. The funding pause involves mostly grants from and contracts with the Departments of Agriculture, Defense, Education, and Health and Human Services. The moves are the latest and largest in a rapidly escalating campaign against elite American universities that's resulted in billions in federal funds being suspended or put under review in just over a month. Other schools that have funds threatened include Brown, Columbia, Harvard, UPenn, and Princeton. Cornell and Northwestern are both facing investigations into allegations of anti-Semitism and into accusations of racial discrimination stemming from their efforts to promote diversity.
Yeah, this would be racism against whites or Asians based on various DEI efforts. Notable here, Northwestern now the first non-Ivy League school to be targeted here by the administration. Northwestern says, by the way, that at stake here is potential funding for research on things like the world's smallest pacemaker, Alzheimer's. And so that's the thing here is the federal government believes it holds the cards to get the universities to follow through on policies that either it believes that it is breaking or that it should pursue on a variety of matters. And so they're holding up basically all funding. And most funding to universities, especially schools of this sort, are related to research for health-related matters or defense-related matters. And so Northwestern being targeted here, Cornell as well. Cornell says in a statement they've received more than 75 stop work orders from the Pentagon, and they had research dealing with defense, cybersecurity, and health. Northwestern issued a progress report recently talking about its efforts to tackle anti-Semitism, saying that it is protecting Jewish students. It has mandatory anti-Semitism training for all students, faculty, and staff. Cornell has also defended itself, saying it is doing more and believes it's fighting anti-Semitism here. So just the latest in some of what we've been watching here, this fight between the administration and a number of universities.
From the BBC, hundreds of rescue workers in the Dominican Republic continue to search for survivors of a roof collapse at a nightclub in the capital, Santo Domingo. At least 124 people died, more than 150 were injured. It happened just before 1 a.m. local time at the Jet Set Club. Officials there estimate that they have about 24 hours left to be able to find survivors under the rubble.
Hundreds of guests were inside the venue attending a concert by a merengue singer named Ruby Perez. You might be familiar with the former baseball players who were sadly inside this venue and have been confirmed dead. It includes Octavio Dotel and Tony Blanco. Dotel played for a number of teams, including the Chicago White Sox, St. Louis Cardinals, and others. Tony Blanco briefly for the Washington Nationals. Incidentally, he has a son right now who is making his way up through Major League Baseball. The footage is tragic. You can see this collapse happening, and they're still investigating the cause here as they try to still recover people. And it really is a urgent effort down there to try to find as many survivors as possible.
From Politico, President Trump signs an executive order Wednesday lifting restrictions on how much water can be used by shower heads, saying his administration would make America's showers great again.
We've been waiting for it.
The order underscored how Trump remains fixated on one of his favorite targets, more efficient shower heads that he has blamed for ruining his perfect hair. The order directs the Energy Department to rescind a regulation issued under President Barack Obama and then later reinstated under President Biden. The rule limits the flow from each shower head on the market to 2.5 gallons of water per minute.
This was a bit of Trump in the Oval Office yesterday. In my case, I would like to take a nice shower to take care of my beautiful hair for 15 minutes until it gets wet. Drip, drip, drip. It's ridiculous. What you end up doing is washing your hands 5 times longer, so it's the same water, and we're going to open it up so that people can live again.
Can we live? I mean, really, Moshe.
How do you like my impression? Anyway, so this is something, by the way, he did on the campaign trail. He had like a whole shtick about it where like he's like, let's talk about shower head pressure. And he talked about it for a while. During his first term, this is an issue as well. During that time, he directed the Energy Department to introduce what efficiency advocates called a loophole to a rule that was imposed by Obama related to water efficiency. The agency at the time, this is under Trump, dictated that for shower heads with more than one nozzle, the limit could be applied to the flow from each nozzle rather than the entire fixture, basically allowing more water to come through a single shower head. But I won't make any promises to any of you anytime soon. Apparently, a number of manufacturers of shower heads are not looking for like another rollback because you had the Obama rules, and then Trump imposed his rules first term, and then Biden brought back the Obama rules, and now Trump is reimposing his rules. So I don't know if there's certain maybe foreign manufacturers that you might need to go to. Jill, it takes us back to one of our favorite Seinfeld episodes.
Moshe was immediately where I went with it.
This is, I mean, and by the way, the shower head water pressure issue, I mean, that goes back, that was like a mid-90s episode on Seinfeld where they like install low-flow shower heads. And then is it like Newman or Kramer? They find like a kind of black market shower head guy.
They find one that's meant to clean elephants.
There you go. Which I imagine, Trump might be familiar with that episode. So among everything, there's just so much coming out of the White House in Washington these days. And we try to highlight what we can that is both important and interesting. This one probably falling more in the interesting category than the important category.
Moshe, I do get his point, though, that perhaps the low flow defeats the purpose because you still need to get the shampoo and conditioner out of your hair. Speaking as a woman with longer hair, you can't just get out of the shower if you still have shampoo in there.
Yeah.
So if the water pressure isn't as strong, it does take you a bit longer.
Right. So exactly. So like, what's that calculation of like shorter shower, more pressure, longer shower, less pressure? Where is that? But I get it. I was staying at a friend's place And like, I was like, thank you for letting me stay here. But like, can we talk about your shower pressure?
And I like that in his quote, he says, can we live?
Can we live again?
And finally, from USA Today, the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles will feature an expanded program with new mixed gender team events in several sports, including golf and gymnastics. The International Olympic Committee announced the new mixed gender events Wednesday when it unveiled the entire sport program for the 2028 Games. They're going to help bring a team twist to Olympic golf, which previously only featured individual men's and women's competition. Also a new dimension to gymnastics, where team competitions had previously been divided by gender. The IOC will also debut a 4x100 mixed gender relay in track and field to go along with the mixed 4x400 that has been contested at the past two editions of the Summer Games.
Also exciting, what'll be the fastest race in swimming, they're adding the 50-meter breaststroke, 50-meter backstroke, and 50-meter butterfly to the games as well. So even more swimming, which is, one of the more popular sports, both here and abroad, and the U.S. tends to dominate there. So maybe some opportunities for some more U.S. medals. So the Chinese swimming teams have been great in recent years, as were the French recently. So as for the mixed gender events, the IOC says that they are the true embodiment of gender equality, men and women competing on the same team here. Now, outside the Olympics, this isn't necessarily rare for those sports. There are invitationals in golf where men and women are mixed, as well as in gymnastics. So there is that. They every 4 years for the Summer Games, every 4 years for the Winter Games, they do like to bring in some new sports. And then sometimes the less popular ones go out, and then sometimes some sports come back. This upcoming games in LA, look for 5 sports that are being added back to the Olympic program. That includes baseball and softball, which used to exist back in the day, went away, they're back. Cricket, flag football is coming to the Olympics, as are lacrosse and squash. Flag football at the Olympics, Jill.
Moshe, it's all the rage here on Long Island.
When is pickleball coming, though? I feel like the pickleballers are probably going to be upset that it's not an Olympic sport yet.
Moshe, apparently pickleball is too new, and there's just not a governing body for it, which means just give it some time.
Oh, yeah, pickleballers. Go get your governing body, the International Organization of Pickleballers, and develop some standards, and you won't be there in 2028, but I bet you'll be there by 2032. Speaking of dates, that brings us to On This Day in History, April 10th, 1912. The clue earlier, you jump, I jump, right? Jack and Rose, obviously. But this is the actual Titanic on this day in 1912. It embarked on its maiden voyage. Sadly, it would be its only voyage. It would end in tragedy 4 days later when it struck an iceberg and sank. If you actually go to New York and you walk along the west side bike path, just off the meatpacking neighborhood by Chelsea Market, there is the place where the Titanic was supposed to arrive. They actually customized a port because the Titanic was the biggest ship in the world at that time. Sadly, it would never dock there, but there's a little plaque. On this day in history, a happy 100th birthday to The Great Gatsby, published on this day by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Jill, a classic book about Long Island.
Oh, I know.
You're like, we got Billy Joel and The Great Gatsby, Moshe.
Moshe, I hold on for dear life to all of our treasures here on Long Island.
The 10 Commandments of Long Island.
The Gold Coast. I mean, this is what we have here.
I know. That's why I wanted to make sure we gave it a shout out.
We don't have the Chicago teeth.
we don't have the fluoride levels you have in Chicago to ensure no cavities for several centuries. All right, we were talking about Olympic sports earlier on this day in history in 1971. Ping pong diplomacy officially started as a team from the U.S. arrived in China at the invitation of the government as we were opening up ties with China. Of course, for many of us, probably our image of ping pong diplomacy is Forrest Gump, right, Phil?
Moshe, that is where my head goes, sadly.
All right, a bit of pop culture on this day in history. 55 years ago today, the Beatles were officially broken up. It had been rumored for months. You could trace it back to the death of their manager back in 1967. Other histories say that John Lennon had quit the group the previous year, but had kept it secret because of the business implications of the Beatles breaking up. But most of that was happening behind the scenes. Why today is important, April 10th, 1970, Paul McCartney went public that he was leaving the Beatles. That was the major headline. That's when we now officially consider the Beatles being broken up on this day. Remarkably, more than 50 years later, Paul McCartney is still performing. And he was at the Super Bowl this year, right? Sitting with like Adam Sandler and somebody else.
He's still crushing life.
Paul McCartney is still rocking it. And it's crazy because, like, you know, he was rocking 60 plus years ago. In less significant pop culture news, on this day 26 years ago, No Scrubs reaches #1 on the charts, TLC's hit. And 33 years ago today, one of my favorite movies growing up, Newsies, Disney's The Newsies. I'm the king of New York, look at me. Premiered in theaters. Santa Fe. Don't they have a song about Santa Fe, too? Jill, do you remember Newsies?
Never saw it.
Add it to the list, folks.
Moshe, that list is getting long.
I mean, I wouldn't put like Newsies at the top of the list, but it's a cute thing. It's actually like good for you to watch, like with Alex. Like I think your daughter is like getting there like that. I think it'd be like a fun movie for her.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It helps us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
Thanks, everybody. We will see you tomorrow, which, believe it or not, is finally Friday. So we're almost there, folks.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.